Sit down. Good afternoon, everybody. Lots of familiar faces and old new faces. Welcome, everybody. It's a very special day. It's the Tibetan Uprising anniversary. So we especially think of really the tragedy of Tibet, really, and we owe so much to the Tibetans and their culture, and it's good that we remember them, and because when they know about what we're doing, that we're spreading Dharma in the West and we're practicing Dharma, they feel so heartened and so happy. So to really acknowledge we are doing this to honour them in their struggle for their independence and ability to carry on practicing Dharma themselves. So we'll dedicate our punya today especially for that. And before you go, you might want to make an offering of a candle in front of the stupa. If you ask Tara, she will tell you where they are, and you can just make an offering on the stupa. I also wanted to mention before starting about, I don't know whether everybody heard the news about Mark. You remember Mark? That he died suddenly. Was it a couple of months ago? So we've been dedicating punya and wishing him, sending our good wishes and prayers for his remaining on the path of Dharma and not losing his way, and that we meet again and again and to practice together in this and future lives for the benefit of all beings, bringing all beings to awakening. So just wanted to say that too, so you could all acknowledge that connection, those of you who remember him. And now we come to the final stage of progressive stages of meditation on emptiness. So is there anybody here who hasn't been following the course at all? There's a few. Okay. So I think you'll probably get a lot out of it if you just relax and don't panic that what are we talking about? But is there anyone who's not been introduced to formless meditation? Okay, so you've all been introduced to that. That's good. Good. So as you know, this the book, Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness, I was working it out. It must have been when Khenpo Rinpoche came to the West in 1977 or 8, was it? And he was teaching these 5 stages of meditation on emptiness, and I was translating, and I produced this book of those teachings just before I went to Oxford to write my doctoral thesis on the last stage of the 5, which is called Shentong. Shentong is a Tibetan word which means empty of other. Nice opaque kind of name for something. But it's very significant, and it's actually about Buddha nature, which perhaps makes you perk up a bit. That sounds more interesting, doesn't it? Buddha nature, whatever that is. So the first 4 stages of meditation on emptiness, we had quite a... At the last talk I gave, I went through the 2 kinds of Madhyamaka all in one talk. You could in fact spend years looking at Madhyamaka, that's the 3rd stage. No, the 4th stage, 3rd and 4th stage. and 5th really. But I rushed it a bit because, yes, it seemed we were dragging on a bit. We'd already reached the end of the year. But I think we could go back to that. We can go back to all of those stages. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to set up a forum where people can post me questions on progressive stages of meditation and emptiness, and I can answer them, so that if you go there and have a look, you might see questions and answers that might be quite helpful as you go through, because everyone's going to go through it at their own pace. Some people didn't start at the beginning and sort of want to catch up. Some people might want to look at it after this course is finished and need to go. They want to listen to the materials, but again, they may have questions that they want to put up, which other people might benefit from. So that's what I'm hoping. You might not know, it's also an audio book now. So you can actually order it as an audio book. That's what I wanted to say, especially for people who haven't been following the course so far. So this talk is the 5th talk, the 5th stage, called Shentong. It is a form of Madhyamaka. Madhyamaka means middle way, really. So it's the middle way between existence, sort of the middle way between when we try to describe things, we describe them either as existing or not existing, or both or neither. But actually the way they are can't be grasped in that way. So they have to be known in another way. And this other way of knowing is what we need to discover. And this is why the Buddha's way is called the middle way, because that's what the Buddha taught. It's beyond any kind of philosophical view you can work out philosophically. You have to find this other way of knowing and know it directly through, conventionally we say meditation. You have to know it directly, almost as a revelation, as something that dawns on you. It's like and all the meditation traditions are playing around this edge of how do you find that? How do you find that other way that's not grasping at concepts and ideas and views, just letting go into, you could say, emptiness or spaciousness of experience or whatever. And you'll notice in the progressive stages of meditation on emptiness, the emphasis is on meditation, and that at the end of each chapter in Rinpoche takes us back to the formless meditation. Just having investigated and tried to understand the nature of your self or your mind or concepts, just settle then and relax into meditating on the spaciousness of awareness itself. Just relax. And he says this each time, whether at each stage, and you have to assume that there's a deepening process involved in letting go into space or emptiness. And indeed that's what we teach in the Awakened Heart Sangha. When we teach formless meditation, the idea is you start with some rough understanding or some kind of intuitive sense of what that might mean, and over time that deepens and clarifies through the various instructions you receive and through your own experience in meditation. So it's exactly the same here. So although some of the language starts to sound quite complicated, and it looks quite philosophical and kind of something that you could get into intellectual arguments about with yourself or other people, at the end of the day, it's just another way of helping us to be more precise and go deeper into what that really means, to let go into the space of awareness. What does it really mean? What is it we're holding on to? How the grosser the concept we're holding on to, the easier it is to let go of. The more subtle the concept we're holding on to, the more difficult it is even to spot it, let alone let go of it. And yet, the greater the reward. So letting go of some very subtle, deeply held concept, like self and other or time and space or whatever, results in a huge shift in the nature, in the way we see, when we know anything, the kind of knowing. It sort of moves us into a different way of knowing. Whereas the big gross concept like this is my enemy, I have to kill him, that's if we refine that, it's relatively easy to see this is just my thinking. I don't have to follow that through. I don't even have to believe it. There's an immediate sense of relaxation, but we're still more or less the same as we were before. We're still knowing things in the same sort of way as we did before. But that process can become much more subtle until it leads to a point of complete transformation where we transform from being an ordinary deluded being to an enlightened being, from a being that's suffering in endless rebirth in samsara to a being that's liberated and able to act forever to benefit others. So, yeah, it's quite a big shift. This is what we're talking about. I thought I'd, in order to help you to focus, I thought I'd structure this talk around the verse, which is called the Meditator's Verse, which Jayasiddhi was asking me about. What page is it on, Tara?
A19.
Right, A19, that's the prayer book, the big red book. A19, here there's nothing to remove, nothing to add. The one who sees the truth of being as it is, by seeing the truth, is liberated. So this is, if you like, the quintessential Shentong verse. So here there's nothing to remove. So up until this point we've been talking about emptiness as being a matter of dropping our concepts, our confused concepts. So there's a sense in which there's something to drop, something to let go of. So this is the final revelation. Actually, everything that seems to be obscuring our mind, our knowing, is an illusion. So you don't get hold of an illusion and get rid of it, do you? You can't. You just see through it. You don't get rid of it. You don't sweep it away, wash it away, sort of scrub it out. You see through it, and it doesn't need anything doing to it other than seeing. Oh, that's an illusion. So there actually is nothing to give up. And of course, if you're sitting in the formless meditation, there's plenty to give up, isn't there? You're sitting there, and your mind's going here, and your mind's going there, or you're sort of discovering a not here or not there, or you have to keep coming back. So all the time there's a sense, I need to be doing something. And in a way you're right, because if you didn't have the idea I should be doing something, you'd be away with the fairies, wouldn't you? You'd just be sitting there thinking. So at a certain level, you have to notice you are thinking, and you have to notice the thoughts coming in your mind and disappearing again. But at some point, you're going to see through it, and you're going to realise it's the mind itself that isn't separate from the mind that knows itself. So there's nothing separate from the mind to give up. And when you see that, you can relax. But of course, that's easy to say. It's a long process to arrive at that. And it says, the one who sees the truth of being, very difficult to translate in Tibetan because they tend to leave out pronouns. And in English you have to put them in. So you have to say something sees the truth of being. So what am I going to put in there? So maybe I could have said that which sees, or the one who sees, or he who sees, or she who sees, or... So I put the one who sees, but I could have put that which sees. So it's the knowing, it's the intelligence of, or wisdom intelligence that sees the truth. What truth? The truth of what is, being. And how is it seeing it? It's seeing it as it is, as opposed to how it isn't. Because we see the truth of being all the time, but we see it as it isn't. So the one who sees it as it is, by seeing, so that awareness or that knowing intelligence that sees it as it is, in that way, only way that you either see it as it isn't, which is a false way of seeing, or you see it as it is, which is a true way of seeing. By seeing the truth, just by seeing it, the truth, as it is, that is liberation. So there is nothing to give up. You don't have to give up anything, you just have to see. You have to see in the right way. So that's why in the Mahamudra tradition the whole emphasis is on the view, seeing. It's a view that is beyond all views. So one kind of view is holding a view, which is always a distortion. And the other kind of view is a view, the true view, which is not holding a view, which is a way of seeing, which is simply seeing the truth as it is, and by seeing the truth, liberated. So I always think it's a good idea to remind ourselves, after we've been sitting in meditation for a while, it's often I think we come away from it feeling, oh, I could do with a break, as if somehow it's all been hard work. When in fact meditation is all about relaxing the mind, and it should be the most relaxing thing you ever do. So towards the end of the session we read out these words just to remind ourselves, here there is nothing to give up, nothing to remove, nothing to add. The one who sees the truth of being as it is, by seeing the truth, is liberated. But I haven't said anything about nothing to add, because obviously we're following this path to liberation because we're intuiting there is a state of being that is liberated, which is free, spontaneous, full of joy, full of light, full of love and compassion, the power to help others. This is the Buddha nature. This is what we're aiming at. And we, at this stage of the path, we sort of think to ourselves, there's a lot of work to do. I look at my compassion, I look at my state of mind, I look at my qualities, and I think, well, if I'm going to get to that stage of, that matches the enlightened Buddha, there's obviously a lot of work needs to be done. And we work on trying to becoming more patient and more compassionate and more loving and more faith, have more wisdom. But it's like we're accumulating or sort of building up this sort of power of goodness, if you like. Yet in the end, that isn't how it is. We already have Buddha nature. We don't actually have to build it up. We don't have to get it. We don't have to invent it or create it. We're already there. And you think, well, hang on. It doesn't make any sense because, look at this. Look at me, how can you say I'm already there? And when we look at ourselves, what we're seeing is our obscurations. We're seeing in a way that's a twisted way. We're looking at something that in a way has become obscured. So you say, well, so what? That's just a difference in words, isn't it? But there could be a complete difference in attitude. There could be quite a difference in attitude, because if we weren't already Buddha, we could actually think, well, I'm not like that. I'm kind of I've heard people say even that they feel they're a failure, or they're pathetic, or they're no good, or they've got no value, or they're worthless, or people have all sorts of beliefs about themselves, which is a tremendous obstruction. So even if you could just for a moment or two think it's possible that I'm simply obscured. Actually, what I am is boundless. Spaciousness, clarity, openness, all the Buddha qualities. It's just I don't see it. It's become obscured. And if you believe that, then you feel resourced and ready to follow the path. Because all you need to do is to let go of the obscurations as you step by step. You don't need to worry about, am I good enough? Of course you are. It's just are you willing enough, really? Are you willing enough to take the journey? And if you are, then, there's nobody who can't follow this path, because we all are from the beginning. We all, from the beginning, have this Buddha nature. So nothing to add, which is can be quite a relief, because even if you've had a good meditation, maybe you've had a really good meditation and you kind of feel really peaceful and open and full of love and kindness. And there's a little anxiousness there of, is this enough? Or can I hang on to this? Can I maintain this? A sort of like somehow I've got something and I want to stay and keep this, or I want to deepen it, or I want to make it more, something like that, which is again going to obstruct the natural blossoming, if you like, of your Buddha nature, which doesn't need your sticky hands on it. It doesn't need your sticky fingers to kind of do something to it. It just needs to be allowed to come into the foreground, really. So it's really good to remind yourself both ways. There isn't anything to give up, and there isn't anything to add. The one who sees the truth of being as it is by seeing the truth is liberated. It's a very, very, very simple message. So at the end of these 5 stages of meditating on emptiness, we come to this ultimate simplicity of this view that from the beginning we are Buddha, and therefore that's what we need to gain confidence in. And for those of you who are doing the Discovering the Heart of Buddhism course, I think you might recognise the way the course is laid out to help us to recognise what that Buddha nature might be. The heart width, having confidence in oneself, in what one is in essence, having this being connected to the life that's in the heart wish, that we're already intuiting the direction in which we want to go, and it's a matter of orientating ourselves with that. It's exactly the same thing. This is, what is it? It's not anything, but it's alive, it's real, it's our heart. And there's so many ways in which we talk about heart, which indicates we do have from the beginning some very deep intuition about the essence of our being, the essence of all beings. And it has this quality of awareness or clarity and openness, spaciousness and sensitivity. So we discover that within ourselves. In discovering the heart of Buddhism, we discover this Buddha nature within ourselves. and that then becomes the basis for our practice. So you might think, oh, well, do we need this progressive stages of meditation and emptiness then? I'd say yes, we do. Because even though we might get a little glimpse of openness, clarity and sensitivity through our meditation and through following the course and reflection and so on, it's very elusive, and it comes to us in fits and starts as we practice, and this is where the importance of recognizing it's a part, the whole way the course is laid out, the whole way progressive stages is laid out, it's spiral learning. So those of you who are not familiar with that turn of phrase, it means you come back to the same truths again and again at a deeper level. So the first time you hear about the not self, of the emptiness of not self, you have a certain understanding, and you maybe go through the other stages of progressive stages and arrive at the Shentong View, but then after a while you realise, actually I'm still clinging on to my idea of self. Even though I've taken on board the idea of Buddha nature, what I'm really struggling with is I still believe in my ordinary deluded self as being myself. So from that place of starting to gain some confidence in what my true nature is, I still need to look very carefully at the way I'm grasping. On a day-to-day basis, we might have a really good meditation and then get up and then start worrying away, like as if we'd never done any meditation ever in our lives, and maybe lose our temper, or maybe suddenly get terribly passionate about something and notice I'm still the same as I was before. Has this meditation helped at all? I'm sure it has helped, but still, even though we might glimpse a very deep truth about Buddha nature, we still need to look at our confused mind, which those of you who know the word klesha, the klesha mind, the troubled mind that keeps samsara going. It's still very helpful to use the medicine, if you like, of the Shravaka view, or the Chittamata view, or the Madhyamaka view. You can still apply that to good effect. You don't need to think, I've reached this fifth stage now, so I don't bother with the first ones. It doesn't work like that. When you reach the fifth stage, you look back at the first one and you think, now I have a better understanding of stage one. I can start practicing it again. The same with DHB. When you go through the first few books and you look back at the first one again and you realise, now I can understand the first one much better because I'm coming round a second time. So I would encourage you all to think about it in that way. Now sometimes Shentong is contrasted with Rangtong. So I said emptiness of other, Shen is other, as in my name, Shen, other. My name is Shen Pen, which is benefit others. And this is Shentong, which is empty of other. So it's that Buddha nature, if you like, that ungraspable Buddha nature that's known in a way quite differently from the way the grasping mind knows things. And it's empty of any of those things that you might be able to grasp. So it really is marking that contrast that we might say ultimate reality in Buddhism is emptiness. When you're talking about the emptiness of grasped things, they are empty in the sense of illusion. When you talk about emptiness in terms of ungrasped true nature of awareness, it's not illusion. It's what's real. So why call it emptiness? It's a good question, isn't it? It's called emptiness to defeat the grasping mind. Because if you think, there is something ultimately real, you want to grasp it. And that mind that wants to grasp it then gets totally frustrated because it can't. It by its very nature, it it cannot grasp it because it's only can grasp what it can grasp, and this isn't of that nature. So it's called emptiness because it's empty of illusion and graspable things, or that mind that tries to grasp, when it tries to grasp the true nature of reality. It's shocked, really. It's shocked because it gains its security from knowing stuff, being sure about stuff and holding its views and opinions. And when it realises it's not going to ever know or hold an opinion about its own true nature, it can come through as a really shocking experience, as if suddenly it's even worse than death. It's even worse than like everything disappears. Everything that you thought you could rely on has disappeared, and sometimes it's possible to have quite a strong, shocking experience of that. And even if you don't have one strong, shocking experience of it, over time you get these little kind of oofs, feeling of that was something quite different. But at the same time as it's different, it's also very alive. So it sort of draws you back to itself. So it's called emptiness, but it's a very affirmative emptiness. And as you go through the progressive stages of meditation on emptiness, the initial stages are quite focused on what's false and describing them as empty. And then you rest in that emptiness. But it's still always got that sense of, I'm seeing something false and I'm remedying it with this medicine called emptiness, seeing emptiness. And that gets more and more subtle as you go through the stages. And when you come to the Shentong, you don't do that anymore. It's like, if you're still doing that, you're still in the stage before. You're still in a more either prasangika or svatantrika view. Because if you've reached the Shentong view, you're really where we would be if we could really understand DHB. We're really having we're resting in that confidence that we find in our heart when we recognise our nature to be openness, clarity, sensitivity, without any grasping. Then you don't have to negate anything. Even when thoughts come into the mind, they're clarity. They're the clarity of the nature of mind. And when thoughts come into the mind, they're ungraspable. There's nothing there to negate. So the thoughts themselves are demonstrating openness, clarity, sensitivity. They're not something separate from it. So no need to stop the thoughts, because that's how you see them. It's not even a matter of letting them go, because they never were there. They weren't something that was there to be let go of. Another expression is used for that. It's called self-liberated. They're self-liberated. They don't need letting go of. They're never there. Self-liberated means their nature in themselves is liberated. You don't need to liberate them. So you might get a little glimpse of that from time to time. And then you might find you are caught up in the thought and letting go of the thought. And there's still a sense I've got to do something. And then you might just for a moment or two get the sense of, oh, there isn't anything to do. And then the old habits kick in again. But playing on that edge is a good place to be when you're practicing. So that's empty of other. So why this term rangtong? Rang is self. It's not self in a sort of the big I am kind of self, but more self in the sense of nature. So some things, an illusion, is empty of the nature. Well, it's empty because when you see through the illusion, it disappears. You don't have the illusion anymore. So you couldn't then sort of see the nature of the illusion and then have the illusion and analyse it, because it wouldn't be there anymore. Whereas when you see the nature of your being or awareness or mind or heart or whatever you want to call it, when you see reality, it is reality. It's not illusion, it's reality. So you can see the true nature of reality. But when you see an illusion, and you see the true nature of the illusion is an illusion, then you're not seeing anything. You don't have anything there to look at anymore. So it's empty in itself. Rangtong. So, although the last phase of the stage of meditation on emptiness is called Shentong, it doesn't mean it's not. It doesn't require also you to realise Rangtong. They come together as a pair. So there's Rangtong and Shentong, realising the emptiness of what's not real and the emptiness that is reality itself. So both Rangtong and Shentong. And you can't go around saying, oh, I only practice Shentong, I don't bother with Rangtong. It's not possible. If you haven't bothered with Rangtong, you still don't realise that an illusion's an illusion, so you're not going to realise reality. So, nonetheless, you will hear people talking about Shentongpas and Rangtongpas. You know, some teachers teaching their Rangtong and some of the teachers teach Shentong, as if there's some kind of philosophical debate going on, you know. So what's that about? It's usually about some kind of misunderstanding, but it does get quite serious, to be honest. Within the tradition as a whole, I think within the Buddhist tradition as a whole, there have been quite strong movements within the tradition to try to characterise Buddhism as a kind of intellectual system that teaches, for example, there's no self, or everything's empty, or everything's causes and conditions, it's all a stream of causes and conditions, and there's no self and nothing real in it. And you might recognise some of these characterisations, and all of that's nonsense, actually. But it has led to a lot of argumentation and I think distortion of the tradition in various ways. So the fact that we have to come in at this stage and talk about Shentong, I think is a reflection of that intellectualization that's gone on over the centuries. From quite early on in the history of Buddhism, there's been a tendency to get into this intellectualization, the forming of views, and then a meditative tradition coming in to oppose it. And then for a time things have got a little bit corrected, and then there's been another tendency to get to scholarly, intellectual, explaining things away, rather than this other way of knowing that comes through the meditative tradition. And this seems to have happened in all the different Buddhist countries. Certainly in Tibetan Buddhism, you get both. You do get this tension between the scholarly, doctrinal, commentarial tradition of trying to pin things down versus the meditative tradition based on experience that's trying to express things in much more experiential terms, I suppose you'd have to say, and not getting caught up in all this philosophical debate and so on. So there is this tension within the tradition, and I think we notice it among ourselves, don't we, as Western Buddhists. Some of us are really interested and keen on learning through experience and meditation, and not really interested in lots of intellectual ideas, and some people who just fascinated by books on Buddhism and more intellectual ideas, even if they don't understand them, which fascinates me, because I think I'm the first lot. I just want the experience and as little of the intellectual bit as possible. But then Rinpoche sent me to go and study because he said, if you're going to answer people's questions, you need to study. So if I can answer your questions, that's Rinpoche's blessing, sending me to study. So where was I? Oh yes, Rangtong. So you do get some teachers who they see that their students are still grasping and they haven't understood the illusory nature of their thinking mind. So they won't let their students, they don't give them any opportunity to grasp on to this idea of Buddha nature. Because if they do, they'll never understand emptiness and they will therefore never understand Buddha nature. So this is quite a strong tradition within Buddhism to not teach Buddha nature but to teach emptiness, and if they teach Buddha nature at all it would be quite late on and it would be one-to-one when they felt the student was at a stage where they wouldn't misunderstand it. So they, in a way, they're teaching in this Shentong way, but their didactic technique, if you like, has been not to do it overtly. Whereas there's also a very strong tradition of attacking Shentong kind of way of teaching, this Buddha nature type of teaching, as being not Buddhist even. So you will meet that at various times and places, this has been said. Or another thing that's done is to explain Buddha nature in, I would say, Rangtong terms. So rather than saying, they say, yes, we have Buddha nature, but they describe it in terms of, that from the Shentong point of view, would say, well, that's just another view, just another grasped at view. It's not pointing beyond the thinking mind, it's still the thinking mind. So I just wanted to warn you about that, and in my doctoral thesis I talk about the what I call exclusive Rangtongpas, who think that all you can say about reality is that it's everything is impermanent and conditioned, all dharmas are impermanent and conditioned, and there's the emptiness of that, and that's it. That's what Buddhism teaches. And emptiness is understood in a Rangtong sense, that this is all illusory. As soon as you hear that, you think, well, that sounds quite nihilistic, doesn't it? So what is liberation then? And in these traditions, they're running hard to try and find a way around that, how to avoid it sounding nihilistic. Maybe there's some corrective thing that brings it round to a more Shentong view, but they don't come out with that. They tend to talk about the Shentong view as being, non-Buddhist because it's teaching that ultimately there is the Buddha nature. It's ungraspable and therefore can't be negated. So there is an argument going on in the world between exclusive Rangtongpas against Shentongpas, and then there is a tension between those people who think I'm a Shentongpa without actually really understanding that means they need to have understood Rangtong. So enough about that. What's interesting about it all is what does this mean? This Rangtong and Shentong in terms of my own Dharma practice. What do I need to recognise is Rangtong, illusory, and how do I know? How do I find that? What's that distinction that's being made there? And which can get quite subtle. And and what is actually ultimately beyond all concepts. And since we're all totally caught up in our prapancha, for those people who are used to the term prapancha, that's the mind that is creating this illusion of, the egocentric illusion of what's me and mine, and then the illusion of there is a world out there and there's a mind in here, and somehow that's real. There's this real distinction which, if you believe that very strongly, that obstructs seeing reality as it truly is. And then there's the prapancha, or the concepts that there is a mind that's creating the world, if you like. But then again, it's a view that you're holding on to. And when you look at that view, you realise if it's a view, it's not ultimately real. It's just a what can you say? It's almost like a kind of framework for the real. And you have to learn to see the real without this framework of prapancha, or ideas or concepts that are actually not it. So if you're going to get a direct experience, it has to drop that kind of mind. This is what the Madhyamaka is trying to get us to realise. But there's something a bit worrying about that process of cutting through all concepts, because if you start saying everything's just concept and not real, you've got no reason to think it matters what you do, because nothing's real. So how could you get an effect that would ripen to you of an action that you did? So how could you generate samsara and suffering, and how could you step out of that and follow the path to awakening? It's all just made up. So you're kind of, as a Buddhist, you have to kind of believe there is a path, otherwise why follow a path? If you see what I mean, you have to believe in a path. So then this idea, well, there is a path that exists on the relative level, but ultimately you can't grasp anything. So there's a sort of distinction arises between something that sort of exists and its emptiness, which, could be all right, but could lead to problems of its own, because I do hear people say this sometimes when they're talking about ultimate reality and emptiness. They say, well, let's now get to the real world. My real world of samsara, or my everyday life of samsara, that's kind of more real than this abstract idea of emptiness. So it can fall into that problem. So in the Prasangika Madhyamaka, they kind of won't let themselves go there. They don't say anything about how karma ripens, and they don't talk about an Alaya Vijnana and the idea that everything's coming out of the mind, so there is a mind, or there is a relative reality. Nothing can be grasped. So it's right, rigorously, nothing can be grasped. Nothing can be grasped. Like the Buddha himself saying, if it's a view, it's wrong. If it's a conceptual view, it won't be reality. But then the problem with that can be that you're still rather intellectually orientated. So although you're not grasping onto any of these ideas of things existing ultimately, or emptiness being something that's different from the relative, or the relative is something that has some sort of existence, you're not holding on to any of those views. But actually, you're maintaining that view by continually negating whatever's coming up. So you're not really at rest, because to be at rest, you need another faculty. Intelligence or mind, or whatever you want to call it, chitta, it has different faculties. It may be empty, But it has clarity, it has sensitivity, it has all sorts of faculties like memory, sort of rationality, imagination. There's all these faculties. One of its faculties is to be able to follow through and let go. I think mixing sheep praise is the term to let go into a realization or an understanding. So not only can we understand, we have a faculty to understand something, but we also have a faculty to step into it and become that, for that truth to somehow, to embody that truth, if you like, or to live that truth, which is translated as Shraddha, of faith. Faith is a good word. We have the faith to, follow the path. We've got the faith to take refuge, faith to take the bodhisattva vows. It's a faculty we have, Shraddha. And when we have an insight, we could freak out and never go back there, or we could turn towards it and embrace it, rely on it, have faith in it. So this faculty of Shraddha is very much what is needed at that stage where you've let go of, where you've seen everything is Rangtong, everything is empty in itself. Now you need to stop analysing and trust, if you like. We go from discovering the heart of Buddhism to trusting the heart of Buddhism. You have to learn to trust it. You can't do anything if you don't learn to trust your ability and your tools or your path. Or we have that faculty, we can do that. And the Shentong is very much about learning to trust, that I don't need to analyse anymore. The Buddha nature is within me. I can trust its manifestation in my life. I can trust the power of the bodhicitta, the awakened heart that's within me and within the Buddhas and within all beings. I can open out towards that. I can, if you like, I can act as if it's real, and by acting as if it's real, I will discover it is real. You sort of think, how does that work? But it does work like that, doesn't it? If you act as if the door is open, you walk through it. If you act as if the door is shut, you won't walk through it. But you can't say, well, until I walk through it, I don't know if it's there or not. That's right. So you have to kind of act as if you thought it was not there, and then you discover it wasn't there. So it's very much like that in the Shentong, that we're learning to trust what we're intuiting. I think what we intuit from the very beginning, we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be listening to this teaching. We didn't intuit there's something to be discovered. And then as we learn more about it, so we learn what we recognise for ourselves, that we're clinging on to what's false, we start to notice a corresponding aliveness in ourselves. Something's coming alive in ourselves, something that's sort of sending out, not alarm bells, but the opposite. Oh, the bells are ringing, oh, this feels right, this is the right direction. This is a faculty that we have. And in the Shentong, it's affirming that. So yes, just you learning to trust that. And those qualities will emerge more and more. You don't have to work, you don't have to make them happen. You can trust them to start to manifest naturally. I think I'll go straight to incidentally, I didn't mention that this verse, the meditator's verse, is from the text, one of the 5 treatises of Maitreya, the Ratnagotra Vibhaga or Mahayana Uttara Tantra Shastra. my thesis, Buddha Within, is all about this sutra. But this verse is, here there's nothing to remove, nothing to add, is from that text. And also the praise to the three jewels that we do every day, that's also from this text. And it's very Shentong. So you've got that middle verse of the praise to the three jewels. Namo Dhamma, sun, which is not non-existent, nor exists, nor both, nor neither. Other than these two, impossible to analyse. So that's all your Madhyamaka. Escaping all description, realised by the self alone. So this is the Buddha nature. The Buddha nature realises this itself. It realises its own nature. It's not something that's taken as an object, something other than ourselves. It is, if you like, ourself realising the nature of ourself. But you can't get outside of yourself to realise the nature of yourself. So language gets a bit difficult here, but that's basically the message there. It's light of stainless wisdom, this rays banish darkness. It's this wisdom that we have from the very beginning that is able to guide us on the path. If we didn't have that already, we wouldn't recognise the path, even if we tried to follow it. It couldn't emerge because it wasn't there. But it is there. It's like the sun behind the clouds. So that's also from this text. And at the end of the chapter about Buddha nature in this text, there's 5 reasons given for why it's necessary to teach about Buddha nature. And I think it's worth just running through those. That first of all, if we didn't have this teaching that we have Buddha nature, then we would not believe in ourselves. We wouldn't presume to take the Bodhisattva vow, for example. I mean, in the Bodhisattva vow we say, may I attain enlightenment in order to bring all beings to enlightenment. Well, how could little me do that? I mean, who am I to say I'm going to work forever to bring all beings to awakening? Me? If it were actually less than Buddha, we couldn't make a vow like that. It would just be ridiculous. So in order to reach enlightenment, we have to make this aspiration to be able to work for, as a Buddha, to be a Buddha who is working forever to bring beings to enlightenment. I have to make that vow. I couldn't make it if I believed I was less than Buddha by nature. So it gives us the confidence to take the Bodhisattva vow. And if we take the Bodhisattva vow, if we have that aspiration, we will be able to reach enlightenment. And certainly if we don't, we won't. That's absolutely sure. So that's the first reason. Second reason is, if we have this confidence to take the Bodhisattva vow and think, I'm going to work forever to bring all beings to awakening, and then we look at other beings, these pathetic beings who need my help, then we have this fault of, pride and superiority. I feel like, I'm actually better than these other beings. I'm here to help them, sort of patronising pride, which is going to be an obstruction. So knowing that all beings have Buddha nature, we don't look at beings from this high viewpoint. We look at other beings with this sense of how wonderful they are and what can I do to help them to realise it. So it's a really quite a different attitude. And we avoid the fault of overweening pride. The next reason is that if we which one's first? If we don't believe in Buddha nature, then we're taking something that's real to be not real. We're turning away from reality. So there's no way we're going to realise reality if we've already decided it's not true. We have to believe that it's real, and then we can realise it. If we already decided it's not real, that's not the route to realising it, is it? If you see what I mean. If I think, well, I don't believe there is a London, well, you're not going to get to London, are you? You don't believe it exists. So that's a fault. And then the other way round, the next one is that so instead of making the fault of not believing in the real, you don't have the fault of thinking the unreal is real. And that's the danger of thinking, well, look at me, I'm in such a state, I could never reach enlightenment. Because I believe in all my imperfections and faults as being, irremedial. Is that the word? No. They can't be remedied because they are as they are. And that would be a huge obstruction because you're believing what's false is real. So to avoid that fault, you have this view that, no, the only reality is the Buddha nature and everything else is just a distortion or obscuration that only has to be seen through. It's not real. And then the last one is that if we don't have this view of Buddha nature, we will never truly love other beings. And it says as ourself, which is rather Christian sounding, isn't it? But it's a different angle on it. That if we know we have Buddha nature, we can truly love ourselves. Because our true nature is Buddha nature, so we can love that. And then we look at other beings and we can see their nature is Buddha nature and we can love that. So we love others as we love ourselves equally. Because we've all got this Buddha nature. I think that's a knockdown argument, isn't it? That alone is sufficient to inspire us, I think. So we could go in all sorts of directions from there, but I think what I'll do now is ask you if you want to ask any questions.
Yeah. It seems like often people don't really believe anything when you get upset. I tend to dig away at people quite a lot to see what do they really think, underneath it all. And often when you get to this point where they just don't really believe anything, and I find it quite sort of sad, quite upsetting. Often, especially the question, what do you think happens after you die? It's just nothing. And also, I'm not sort of like a Dharma teacher, but you're just talking then about why I teach better nature. But do I still have a sort of feel a sense of wanting to do something, wanting to help in a general way? So. What do you think there is to do in that situation? People are so sort of hopeless in a way.
Yeah.
I am myself as well, but still kind of, people just often don't seem to believe in anything.
It's interesting that, isn't it? But what I notice is when people come to die, if it's a funeral or someone's died, these people who don't believe in anything, you start to see that soft spot because they can't quite bring themselves to say, well, so what? Someone's died. They're trying to find, they're scrapping around, trying to find some sense of giving that person or their life or the moment some meaning, sometimes they can get quite profound momentarily. You sort of feel a real sense of opening. Sometimes they become even more superficial in an effort to somehow cover over how awful it is. But I found if I'm anywhere around, that really the heart language is the way in. That you can just say it to somebody who doesn't. I think I've only ever had one argument with a person at a funeral. but normally I find just saying something quite simple about, but they're still in our heart, aren't they? And it affects people. They're still in my heart. Yes. Yes. And then of course they might try to say yes, but their memory or something like that. But it's more than the memory actually, isn't it? It's not just memory. It's like you don't normally say remembering in your heart, do you? Why in the heart? Because there's some sense of, and often people notice that strange feeling when somebody's died, especially if you've seen them die or you've seen them just after they've died. That feeling of that isn't them. So what is it that's gone, that's them? So I think around that time people are kind of, it's easier to reach people. I notice when you have disasters and things like that, then people will go to the place where people died and they'll offer flowers and they'll talk about holding people in their hearts, and their hearts go out to them, even in ordinary, even on the news they might say, even politicians might say something like that. It's not regarded as being over the top, like if they were to say, well, I'm praying to God for them, if a policeman were to say, I'm praying to God for this person. People think, police aren't supposed to say things like that. But a policeman could say something like, my heart goes out to those people, sort of. And I think that there's probably, if it's done sensitively, I think you can touch something in people around that. But I don't think, I don't think we can think we're going to hoover up everybody. If only. Was there something else you were thinking on it?
Yeah, sort of a lot of things in that area, but
it is. I mean, I have the same problem. My family are not at all interested in anything.
All that sort of material, that idea that everything can be explained in some way.
Or maybe
terms,
yeah.
What do you mean? And then everything is just the brain or just
it
the body.
Doesn't make any sense, does it? It seems so obvious it doesn't make sense. But when people have bought into that, it's really hard to shift them. And I know with my family, my brother is a really nice person, really good mind, but he's just not going to go anywhere near anything that's, you just die, that's it.
I was talking to someone who said if she had a button that could destroy the world, she thought that would be a compassionate act, because then suffering is all,
well, that's logical.
In the body. And I remember thinking the same thing as well. But it's quite amazing. Really? Yeah,
I mean, that is right. If you wanted to end all suffering, with that view,
that was logical. Yeah.
It's totally logical, and it's you sort of think it's a good job people aren't totally logical, isn't it? or we would all be, I mean, it's good that people aren't consistent if they've got a wrong view, because it tempers it. Because, you know, these people who believe in this totally materialistic universe and, you know, in a way, as this woman's saying, you might as well blow everybody up. That's the best way to stop them suffering. Actually, the scientists go home and they really care for their families just like everybody else. You know, they're operating in a completely different way, thank goodness.
While we're here, did you finish?
Oh yeah, sorry, go for it.
While we're here in a subject, I have an issue with death.
Mm-hmm.
How can we... what's your view on death and resolution or suffering and death?
Why isn't death a solution?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Right,
And
yeah.
could we choose death as a solution?
I think you first have to work out what we are in the first place. Because if we're basically mind, whatever that means, and if we discover what mind really means and we find that actually it doesn't die, then killing the body is not going to be a solution.
It's not killing then.
Killing the body or the body dying is not a solution because the mind will continue. So if you become familiar enough with how the mind operates, you will see, oh, it just grasps onto things. So when this body dies, it'll just grasp onto something else. So if the solution to the suffering is not to grasp at what is not real, as if it were real, then there's some chance that you wouldn't even need to die. You could be liberated even in this life. But also it becomes very clear that just dying isn't going to end the suffering.
Yeah, but on the other hand, if the death is not the end or not the thing, the killing is not killing, it's just a choice.
What, killing yourself, you mean?
Or ending life.
So there's nothing wrong with killing?
Yeah.
No, that's a point of view I haven't really heard before, but
Because
oh,
there
no,
will
actually,
be something next.
Actually, I have heard that point of view before, even within the Buddhist context, like a bodhisattva who's really realised might kill somebody for their own good, like somebody who's going to do a very evil deed. If you kill them before they do the deed, they won't get the result of that evil deed. So, you know, there are cases like that. I think this is where the Buddhist view is underpinned by this idea of actions that they bring a result, and that doesn't have to be in this life. You know, it's sort of like, this is from where we are, we can't really understand the nature of this well enough to be able to take it anything else other than on faith, to be honest. But that's what, from the Buddhist point of view, you would say, well, your karma goes on, so you might as well stay in this world where you've got the opportunity to follow the path than to go to another world, which in theory would be as good. So yeah, I mean, you've got a point. If you and so, you know, sometimes yogins do go to other worlds, even in this life, and come back, and they seem to be more free than we are to move around from world to world. Don't know if that's addressing what you're saying.
It's a very deep subject, so I don't want to continue.
But no, it's an interesting point. It is death isn't the end anyway, yeah. That's right. So if you were skillful enough, you could rearrange people.
And again, we don't need to label the death as something wrong.
Or as final.
As a final.
Yeah, it's not the final thing.
Not judge others if they choose so.
To kill themselves, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not so much judging others, but and again, I don't know this firsthand, but the warning is that if you take that karmic action of taking your own life, that produces a knock-on effect in your future lives that isn't good. So it's not a
Will it be
positive
always
action.
not good?
Hmm?
Will it be always not good?
I think this is, if we're going to get very technical about it, I think there might be cases in which it isn't not good. I think some of the lamas who are very realised in the Chinese prisons, I think they sometimes did what, the transference of consciousness, sort of consciously, in a sense, taking their own lives, yeah. So that would mean that, yeah, some cases perhaps it's not. Yeah. An interesting question though, isn't it? Yeah. So anything about the Rangtong Shentong distinction, yeah?
I was interested in you talking about the Shentong. Is there any... So in Yidan practice, which in other traditions are taught almost right at the beginning, in St. Shenrezi practice, is there any difference in that Shentong view if you're doing it properly?
Well, from a Shentong point of view, that's how you would do it. You would have that understanding. But of course, if there are Buddhist traditions that don't accept that view, I don't know what they do. I mean, I do know what they do, but they find ways around it. So you find things taught quite differently, actually. And if you already have a Shentong view, you will tend to hear whatever they say in Shentong terms. So it's almost like a kind of protection.
Yeah.
But if you then speak to a teacher who's really doesn't accept a Shentong view, you will get a whole series of funny answers that you won't be able to make head or tail of. And if you are trained by somebody who's got an anti-Shentong view, they will actually, whenever you intuit a Shentong direction, they will counter-argue you. So you're struggling against it all the time. And I've met people who are coming from traditions like that, who when they read Buddha Within, it was just like a huge relief to them. Oh, I'll throw away all the books I've had, all my books, and thank goodness, because they were intuiting a Shentong they were looking for that, and they were getting it opposed all the time. So it is possible.
It strikes me, it's very clear, everyone intuits a Shentong view.
There you go.
In people I know who are attracted to the Buddha's path.
Yeah, well there you go.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is going on. This kind of... The struggle is going on, and you're lucky if you don't get caught up in it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess it's one's karma. I don't know. But sometimes people are in a tradition like that, and they never realise it because they're not listening properly. And they're not asking questions. So it's kind of good sometimes not to ask too many questions. Yeah, I mean, if you take, for example, the Dalai Lama when he's teaching about emptiness, because of the scholarly tradition to which he belongs to, he can't come out and say, yes, Dolpapa's Shentong view, that's it, it's great. But he still will talk about Buddha nature, but if you listen carefully, he's teaching it in a Rangtong way. But then, when he's finished doing his, scholarly thing, he will start speaking from his heart, and a whole different person comes out. He starts speaking in this very intuitive way that people can pick up on. It isn't sort of doctrinally picky, and people intuit what he's talking about from their heart, So various things are going on.
So that begs the question, you hinted at it, so what's the real purpose of all the scholarly, doctrinal thinking that's been going on for thousands of years, and which must be important?
Well, I think there's two things going on. I think on the one side, you've got a kind of defence of the doctrine, making sure that actually it's being taught properly. So you have a scholarly institution, you have the books, the texts and so on. And then you've got an institution, and then you get teachers, and you get people who really like all this kind of stuff, and they become the teachers. And then at some point, the teaching institution gets separated from the meditative spiritual tradition. So you've got your yogins and then you've got your scholars. And then from then on, this danger is that actually the scholars are not going on and meditating and realising the view, and then interpreting the texts according to how they look, rather than being challenged by a meditation teacher who will take them through, so that they come to really understand the inner meaning. So that's what I think happens over and over again.
Again, that's avoiding what's the benefit of the scholarly tradition?
As I said, to clarify the doctrine.
To clarify, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, to make it clear, to make sure there's integrity, that it's being true to the, its origins and so on. Yeah. And to be able to answer people's questions when they get the wrong end of the stick.
That's which is clarification.
Yeah, clarification, yeah.
It's very important.
And to defend the meditator's view, if you like.
Yes.
If you get clever scholars who are trying to put forward their own scholarly view, the meditators have to be clever enough to be able to point out, actually, we can justify this meditator's view from the text, which you can, which might be overlooked or could be argued if it's all on the same basis in the scholarly tradition. Yes. So it all goes on. I mean, as you say, hundreds, thousands of years of back and forth, and defending themselves against the Hindu tradition as well. A lot of the early stuff, commentarial stuff, was a sort of defence. We're Buddhists, we don't have the same views as these Hindus. And then they would characterise the Hindu views in ways that they could then argue against them and knock them down, which is good in the sense that it sharpens up your thinking, but sometimes it's not really what the Hindus think at all. It's just kind of setting up your own Aunt Sally, if you like, to kind of knock down again. But so there's all sorts of things that have been going on. In some ways, it makes it very difficult to teach Buddhism because there is such a long history. And you sort of, the world is already complicated enough without introducing a whole new history of complication. So that's why in discovering the heart of Buddhism, try to just go straight into the principles and from an experiential point of view and the meditation point of view, and then it can be augmented and supported by looking at the texts. But if you start with the text and you've got different versions and different interpretations of the text, you could be all over the place before you got any real taste of what it's really about. Does that make sense?
Does it?
Yeah. And in a way, from your own practice point of view, and you've got a good teacher and a good sangha, you don't necessarily need to study a lot of stuff. But of course, if you were in a tradition which was arguing against the Shentong View, you might benefit from studying and realising there are other views, and that actually this one is more what I'm looking for than what I've happened to walk into. Because we do happen to walk into things, don't we? We don't actually go around and investigate deeply everything and then decide where to go. We walk into something and see if it fits or not. Yeah. And for a long time, I sort of came in having read a few books on Buddhism and had a little bit of teaching on Buddhism and a bit of meditation, and I could see thoughts coming and going in the mind and realised, don't want to get caught up in them, want to let them go, and then that sort of, some sort of spaciousness arises out of that. And for a long time, that was basically all the Buddhism I had, and it kept me going. But when I started running into Tibetan Buddhist teachings on, not so much Buddha nature, but a little bit, but on deity yoga, guru yoga, and having faith in the guru, which is all based on the idea of this Shentong emptiness as a reality that has all the Buddha qualities that you can open out to with faith and devotion. Before that, I really realised that I couldn't work out who and how and what I was praying to. So I was doing prayers and mantras and things like that, but all the time thinking, but it's all illusion and empty. So why am I putting so much effort into it? So I think it would have helped me to have had these teachings earlier. I think about it and I think, they did try to tell me, but I didn't. I didn't get it. Yeah, Kala Rinpoche used to talk a lot about if you have a lump of coal and you rub it and rub it and rub it, you never get gold. It never comes clean. But if you have a lump of gold and it's covered in dirt and you rub it, you get gold comes out. So, obviously he was talking about Buddha nature. If we weren't already Buddha, there would be no point in purification. But because we are gold from the beginning, then purification is a point. But I didn't get it. I didn't really get what he was saying. It took decades. But I stuck with it.
You did?
Yeah, I stuck with it. Something must have been coming through, mustn't it? Yeah. Has anybody looked at the chapter on Shentong yet? No? Did you find anything there that you found difficult? Because I did.
I was going to say the thing I really liked about it, I think it's just 2 lines. I think quote from Jemben Control, saying that everything up to Shentong was a way of getting rid of ideas, and then there's the practice of Shentong.
Yeah.
So it's just
I
2 lines.
I don't know if it's in there. Is that in there?
Pretty sure, I'm certain.
But it's certainly something like that is in there. Yeah.
It's a lovely little quote, and that all made sense when I read that.
Right. Yeah. So you can't not have. You can't sort of think, I'm not interested in Rangtong. No. You have to be interested in Rangtong, which is the same as I am interested in knowing what's, recognising delusion for delusion. And then if you can recognise delusion is delusion, you can let it go. And then there's some chance you might realise the emptiness that isn't delusion. It's your true nature, which is full of qualities. It's... But it's quite subtle, all the, when you look at these arguments and you really consider them in your meditation, you realise, although in a way I can see that I'm making a mistake, on another level I don't really see it because I keep doing it. So you have to keep coming back to it again and again and realise, yes, I do believe in that. Although I can say, yes, I can say from the time I was at university I realised that you couldn't say that there was a world external to the mind. It doesn't make any sense because you can't get out of your mind in order to find it. So if you say it's not outside the mind, the material world is now not the material world anymore. So you can call it material or not immaterial, but it now has all the qualities of mind. So I could work that out relatively easily, intellectually, but I still live my life with this distinction very strongly, the world outside. If I were to really recognise that the world outside